The mascara had already ruined her carefully applied makeup by the time Vincent Jaeger noticed the woman sitting alone at the edge of the garden, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs while champagne glasses clinked and laughter echoed from the reception tent behind her. He had stepped outside to escape the suffocating cheerfulness of his cousin's wedding, needing a moment away from the endless parade of relatives asking when he would settle down. As if his 32 years and the billion-dollar real estate empire he had built from the ground up meant nothing without a ring on his finger. The September evening air was crisp, carrying the scent of roses from the manicured gardens of the Connecticut estate, and he had been looking forward to a few minutes of solitude when he spotted her. She sat on a stone bench beneath a weeping willow, her pale blue dress pooling around her like spilled watercolor, one hand pressed to her mouth as if she could physically hold back the tears. Her auburn hair had started to escape from its elegant updo, curling against her neck in a way that made her look vulnerable and heartbreakingly real among all the polished perfection inside. Vincent reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the crisp white handkerchief his mother had insisted he carry, a habit from her old-fashioned sense of propriety that he had never quite abandoned. He approached quietly, not wanting to startle her, and cleared his throat gently. She looked up, her green eyes wide and swimming with tears, mascara tracking down her cheeks in dark rivulets. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, and Vincent felt something shift in his chest, an unfamiliar flutter that had nothing to do with the champagne he had been drinking. "I think you need this more than I do," he said softly, extending the handkerchief toward her. She blinked, then let out a watery laugh that was half sob. "I must look absolutely terrible." "You look like someone who is having a rough night," Vincent said, settling onto the bench beside her but leaving a respectful distance between them. Which, at a wedding, usually means one of two things. Either you are the ex, or you just realized you are never going to be the bride. She took the handkerchief and pressed it to her eyes, a genuine laugh escaping despite her tears. "Neither, actually, though I appreciate the vote of confidence." "Then what brings you out here?" Vincent found himself genuinely curious, which was unusual. He had built his fortune by reading people, understanding what they wanted and what they feared, but this woman was already proving difficult to categorize. She dabbed at her cheeks, staining the white fabric with makeup. "The bride is my best friend, was my best friend. I do not even know anymore." Her voice cracked and she took a shaky breath. "Sorry, I should not be dumping this on a complete stranger." "Sometimes strangers are easier to talk to," Vincent said. "No history, no judgment, no expectations." She looked at him properly then, really seeing him for the first time, and he watched her take in his expensive suit, the way he carried himself, the watch on his wrist that cost more than most people's cars. He was used to that look, the calculation that happened when people realized he had money, but her expression shifted to something else entirely, something almost sad. "You are Vincent Jaeger," she said quietly, "the groom's cousin. Rebecca pointed you out earlier, said you own half of Manhattan or something equally ridiculous." "Only a quarter," Vincent said with a slight smile. "I am working on the rest." She did not return the smile. Instead, she looked back down at the handkerchief in her hands, twisting it between her fingers. "Rebecca and I have been best friends since we were 6 years old. We did everything together. First day of school, first heartbreak, college applications, everything. When she got engaged, she asked me to be her maid of honor, and I was so happy for her. But then the wedding planning started, and she changed." Vincent listened, watching the play of emotions across her face, the way her mouth trembled when she paused to collect herself. She became obsessed with money, with status, with making everything perfect and expensive and impressive. She dropped our other friends because they were not successful enough, prestigious enough. She started making comments about my job, about my apartment, about the fact that I am still single at 28. And tonight, right before the ceremony, she told me that she was replacing me as maid of honor with Thomas's cousin Charlotte because Charlotte's father is a senator, and it would look better in the wedding photos. Her voice broke completely on the last words, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Vincent felt anger kindle in his chest, hot and protective. That is inexcusable. The worst part is that I still stood up there during the ceremony. I still smiled and clapped and pretended everything was fine because I did not want to ruin her day. And then I came out here and fell apart like a coward. She pressed the handkerchief to her eyes again. God, I do not even know why I am telling you all this. Because you need to tell someone, and I happen to have a handkerchief, Vincent said. He studied her profile, the delicate line of her jaw, the way she held herself together even as she came undone. For what it is worth, you are not a coward. You are loyal, which is rarer and more valuable than most people realize. She turned to look at him, her green eyes searching his face. You do not even know me. No, Vincent agreed. But I know disloyalty when I see it, and I know what it costs to maintain your integrity when someone else has lost theirs. He had built his business on those principles, had walked away from deals that would have made him richer if they had required him to compromise his values. It was part of why he was successful, why people trusted him, but it was also why he often felt isolated, surrounded by yes men and opportunists. I am Clara, she said suddenly, as if the conversation had reached a point where names mattered. Clara Hartley. Vincent, he replied, even though she already knew. Though you can call me Vince if you want to skip the formality. Vincent suits you better, Clara said, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. You look like a Vincent. Is that a compliment? It means you look like someone who has his life figured out, like nothing could shake you. She folded the handkerchief carefully, her fingers precise despite their trembling. This is probably ruined. I will get it cleaned and return it to you. Keep it, Vincent said. Consider it a memento of the worst wedding you have ever attended. That surprised a real laugh out of her, bright and genuine, and Vincent felt that flutter in his chest again, stronger this time. He wanted to hear that laugh again, wanted to be the reason for it. I should get back inside, Clara said, though she made no move to stand. People will notice I am gone. Let them notice, Vincent said. You do not owe anyone in there anything, least of all her. Clara looked at him, something shifting in her expression. You are not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone more aloof, I guess. Someone who would not sit on a garden bench with a crying stranger. She finally stood, smoothing down her dress, and Vincent rose with her. Even in heels, she barely reached his shoulder, and he found himself wanting to tuck her against his side, shield her from whatever was waiting inside that tent. I am full of surprises, he said lightly, though his mind was already working, formulating a plan. He pulled out his phone. Give me your number, Clara blinked. What, your number? Vincent repeated. I want to take you to dinner. You are asking me out now while I look like a raccoon and am crying over my former best friend's wedding. But there was something in her voice, a spark of interest beneath the disbelief. I am asking you out because you are beautiful even while crying, because you are loyal and real, and because I have not had a genuine conversation with someone in longer than I care to admit. Vincent held her gaze steadily. And because I want to see you again when you are not sad, though I will take you any way I can get you. Color flooded Clara's cheeks, and for a moment, Vincent thought she would refuse. Then she took his phone and typed in her number, her fingers steady now. You are either very smooth or very crazy. Can I be both? Vincent asked, saving her contact information. He sent her a quick text so she would have his number too. I guess I will find out, Clara said. She looked back toward the reception tent, where music had started playing, the sounds of celebration drifting through the evening air. I really should go back. Or, Vincent said slowly, an idea forming, you could leave. Leave? Why stay? You already did your duty, stood up during the ceremony, smiled for the photos. You do not owe her your entire evening, especially not after what she did. He could see her wavering, wanting to agree but held back by years of conditioning, of being the good friend, the reliable one. I cannot just leave, Clara protested weakly. Of course you can. I will leave with you so you are not alone. We can go get real food, something better than overpriced chicken and vegetables cut into tiny shapes. When was the last time you ate? Clara's stomach chose that moment to growl audibly, answering for her. She pressed a hand to her abdomen, embarrassed. I was too nervous to eat earlier. Then it is settled, Vincent said decisively. We are leaving. We barely know each other, which is what dinner is for. He extended his hand toward her, palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. Come on, Clara. Take a chance. Do something for yourself for once instead of for everyone else. She stared at his hand for a long moment, and Vincent could see the war playing out behind her eyes, duty versus desire, obligation versus opportunity. Then, slowly, she placed her hand in his, and he felt that flutter become something more, something that resonated through his entire body. Okay, she whispered. Let's go. They walked around the side of the estate, avoiding the main entrance where guests might stop them, and Vincent led her to where his car was parked. She stopped when she saw it, a sleek black Aston Martin that gleamed in the moonlight. Of course you drive something like this, she said, but there was amusement in her voice now rather than judgment. It is fast and reliable, Vincent said, opening the passenger door for her. Like me. Clara laughed as she slid into the leather seat. You have used that line before. Never, Vincent said honestly, closing her door and walking around to the driver's side. I just made it up. He drove them away from the estate, away from the wedding and the fake smiles and the friend who had betrayed Clara's trust. She was quiet beside him, watching the Connecticut countryside blur past in the darkness, and Vincent let the silence stretch, comfortable and easy. 20 minutes later, he pulled into the parking lot of a small diner that glowed like a beacon against the night sky. Clara looked at the neon sign advertising the best burgers in the state and turned to him with raised eyebrows. This is where you are taking me. The billionaire who owns a quarter of Manhattan brings me to a diner. Trust me, Vincent said, getting out and coming around to open her door. This place has the best food in Connecticut, and nobody cares if you have been crying or if your makeup is smeared. They only care if you are hungry. The diner was busy but not packed, filled with the comfortable noise of clinking dishes and conversation. A waitress with gray hair and a warm smile seated them in a booth by the window and handed them laminated menus. What do you recommend? Clara asked, scanning the extensive list. Everything, Vincent said, but especially the chocolate shake and the bacon cheeseburger. They ordered, and when the food arrived, Clara took one bite and closed her eyes in appreciation. Okay, you were right. This is amazing. Vincent watched her eat, feeling something settle in his chest, a rightness he had not experienced before. She had fixed her makeup in the car using the visor mirror, but there were still traces of tears, still a rawness to her that made her seem more real than anyone he had ever met. Tell me about yourself, he said. What do you do when you are not attending terrible weddings? Clara swallowed her bite of burger and took a sip of her shake. I am an art restoration specialist. I work for a museum in New York, repairing and preserving paintings and sculptures. It is painstaking, detailed work, but I love it. There is something magical about taking something damaged and bringing it back to life. That sounds incredible, Vincent said, and he meant it. How did you get into that? My grandmother was a painter, Clara said, her expression softening. Not famous or anything, but talented. She used to let me help her in her studio when I was little, and I fell in love with colors and textures, and the way art could make you feel things words could not express. When she died, she left me all her supplies and her paintings, and I wanted to find a way to honor that, to work with art even though I was not talented enough to create it myself. I think what you do is creating, Vincent said. You are giving these pieces new life, preserving them for future generations. That is its own form of art. Clara smiled at him, a real smile that reached her eyes. What about you? How does someone become a real estate billionaire by 32? 32, Vincent repeated. How did you know my age? Rebecca mentioned it when she was pointing you out earlier. She had a whole dossier on you, apparently. Said you were successful but too serious, that you needed someone to loosen you up. Clara's smile turned mischievous. She also said you were aggressively single and probably married to your work. Vincent laughed, the sound surprising him. She is not entirely wrong. I started buying properties when I was 23, right out of college. I had some money saved from working construction during summers, and I saw potential in buildings that other people overlooked. I would buy them, renovate them, either sell or rent them out. It snowballed from there. That sounds like an oversimplification, Clara said. You do not become a billionaire by just buying a few buildings. No, Vincent admitted. It took a lot of work, a lot of risk, and a fair amount of luck, but mostly it took understanding that value is not just about money. It is about community, about creating spaces where people want to live and work and build their lives. I could have made more money doing commercial high-rises, but I focused on residential properties, on neighborhoods that needed investment and care. Clara studied him over her shake. You actually care about it. Is that so surprising? A little, she said honestly. Most people with your kind of money seem disconnected from reality, from normal people and normal problems. Vincent considered that. I grew up without much. My father was a construction worker, my mother a school teacher. They worked hard to give me and my sister opportunities, to make sure we could go to college. I remember what it was like to count pennies, to worry about bills. I never want to forget that because the moment I do, I become someone I do not want to be. Your parents must be proud of you, Clara said softly. They were, Vincent said. They died in a car accident 6 years ago, but yes, they were proud. Clara reached across the table and placed her hand over his. I am sorry. Thank you. Vincent turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. Her hand was small in his, her fingers slender and strong, stained with traces of paint she had not quite scrubbed away. He liked that about her, the evidence of her work, the proof that she created and built and cared. They talked through dinner, through dessert, through multiple refills of coffee. Vincent learned that Clara lived in a tiny apartment in Queens, that she had a cat named Monet who knocked over her paint water regularly, that she loved old movies and rainy days and the smell of books. She learned that he still did construction work sometimes when he needed to think, that he had a sister named Veronica who ran a nonprofit, that he read voraciously and poorly cooked everything except scrambled eggs. When they finally left the diner, it was nearly midnight. Vincent drove Clara back toward the city, and she dozed in the passenger seat, her head resting against the window. He glanced at her periodically, committing her features to memory, the curve of her cheek, the way her hair curled against her neck. He woke her gently when they reached her building in Queens, a modest 4-story walk-up in a quiet neighborhood. She blinked sleepily, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. "I am sorry," she said. "I fell asleep on you. Do not apologize. It has been a long night." Vincent walked her to her door, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. At her building's entrance, Clara turned to face him. "Thank you. For the handkerchief, for dinner, for rescuing me from that nightmare. I do not usually fall apart like that." "Everyone falls apart sometimes," Vincent said. "The key is having someone there to help you put yourself back together." Clara looked up at him, her green eyes luminous in the streetlight. "Will I see you again?" "Absolutely," Vincent said. "I will call you tomorrow. We can do dinner again, or a museum, or anything you want. Anything, anything." She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek, her lips soft and warm against his skin. "Good night, Vincent." He waited until she was safely inside before returning to his car, his hand touching the spot where she had kissed him. He drove back to his penthouse in Manhattan with a lightness in his chest he had not felt in years, maybe ever. The next morning, Vincent woke earlier than usual, energized despite the late night. He went through his usual routine of exercise and breakfast while checking emails on his phone, but his mind kept drifting to Clara, to the way she had looked in the moonlight, to her laugh and her tears and her honesty. He called her at 10, hoping it was not too early. She answered on the third ring, her voice slightly breathless. "Hello, Clara, it is Vincent. Did I wake you?" "No, I have been up for hours. I went for a run, cleaned my apartment, and have been staring at my phone wondering if last night actually happened or if I dreamed it." She sounded embarrassed but happy. "It happened," Vincent assured her. "And I was calling to see if you are free tonight. I know a gallery opening that might interest you." "A gallery opening? That sounds fancy. It can be, but the art is supposed to be incredible. Contemporary pieces mixed with classical restoration work. I thought of you." There was a pause, and then Clara said quietly, "You thought of me." "I have been thinking of you all morning," Vincent admitted. "Is that too forward?" "No," Clara said. "It is perfect. What time should I be ready?" They made plans for him to pick her up at 7, and Vincent spent the rest of the day distracted, earning concerned looks from his assistant when he missed a conference call and approving contracts without his usual intense scrutiny. His sister Veronica stopped by his office in the afternoon and immediately noticed something was different. "Okay, what happened?" she demanded, dropping into the chair across from his desk. "You look weird." "Weird how?" Vincent asked, barely glancing up from his computer. "Happy weird." "Content weird. Did you close some massive deal?" "No deal." "Then what?" Veronica leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Oh my God, did you meet someone?" Vincent finally looked at her, his sister who knew him better than anyone. "Maybe." Veronica let out a whoop that made his secretary peek through the door in alarm. "Finally, tell me everything. What is her name? Where did you meet her? What does she do?" "Her name is Clara. I met her at Michael's wedding last night, and she is an art restoration specialist," Vincent said, unable to keep the smile off his face. "Michael's wedding? Wait, you actually stayed at Michael's wedding past the ceremony? You hate those things." "I was planning to leave early," Vincent admitted, "but then I found her crying in the garden and everything changed." Veronica studied him for a long moment, her expression softening. "You really like her." "I really do." "Then do not mess it up," Veronica said seriously. "You have a habit of letting work consume you, of pushing people away when they get too close. If she is special, and I can see that she is based on that ridiculous smile you cannot stop making, then make her a priority." "I will," Vincent promised. That evening, he arrived at Clara's building exactly at 7, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers he had picked up from a street vendor. When she answered the door, Vincent felt his breath catch. She wore a simple black dress that hugged her curves, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders, and she had done her makeup to emphasize her green eyes. She looked stunning. "You brought flowers," she said, taking them with obvious pleasure. "Let me put these in water before we go." Her apartment was small but cozy, filled with books and plants and artwork on every wall. A large orange cat watched Vincent suspiciously from the back of the couch. "That is Monet," Clara said, emerging from the kitchen with the flowers in a mason jar. "He is very judgmental." "I can tell," Vincent said, approaching the cat slowly. Monet sniffed his hand disdainfully before apparently deciding Vincent was acceptable and rubbing against his palm. "He likes you," Clara said, surprised. "He usually hates strangers." "I have a way with judgmental creatures," Vincent said, scratching behind Monet's ears. The cat purred loudly. The gallery opening was in Chelsea, a converted warehouse space filled with light and art and beautifully dressed people holding wine glasses. Vincent kept his hand on Clara's back as they moved through the crowd, introducing her to people he knew, watching her face light up as she examined the artwork. She stopped in front of a restored Renaissance painting, studying it intently. "This is incredible work," she murmured. "See how they maintained the original brushstrokes while stabilizing the canvas, and the color matching is nearly perfect." Vincent watched her rather than the painting, fascinated by her expertise, by the way she saw details he would never notice. "How can you tell?" Clara pointed to a section of the painting. "The underlayers are visible here if you look closely, and you can see where the restoration stops and the original begins. It is masterful work. Whoever did this has decades of experience." An older woman standing nearby overheard and approached them. "You have a good eye," she said to Clara. "I did that restoration." Clara turned, her eyes widening. "You are Margaret Chen. I have read all your papers, studied your techniques. Your work on the Baroque collection at the Met was revolutionary." They fell into an animated conversation about restoration methods and chemical treatments, and Vincent stepped back slightly, content to watch Clara in her element. Margaret eventually invited Clara to visit her studio, exchanging contact information before being pulled away by other guests. "Do you know what you just did?" Clara asked Vincent when they were alone again. "Took you to a gallery opening? You introduced me to Margaret Chen. She is a legend in art restoration. People wait years to study with her." Clara looked at him with something like wonder. "Why did you do that?" "Because you love what you do and you deserve opportunities to grow and learn," Vincent said simply. "And because I wanted to see you happy." Clara took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "You are dangerous, Vincent Jaeger. How so?" "Because you make me want things I did not think I could have." They left the gallery after another hour, both hungry despite the canapés that had been circulating. Vincent took her to a small Italian restaurant he knew, family-owned and intimate, where they were seated at a corner table and served wine and pasta and bread still warm from the oven. "Tell me about your sister," Clara said between bites of pasta. "You mentioned she runs a non-profit." "Veronica," Vincent said, warmth filling his voice. "She is 2 years younger than me, stubborn as hell, and has a bigger heart than anyone I know. Her nonprofit focuses on affordable housing and community development, working with low-income families to help them achieve stability. We work together sometimes when I have properties that would be suitable for her programs." "That is wonderful," Clara said. "My family is much smaller. It is just me and my mom now. My dad left when I was 12 and I do not have any siblings. My mom lives in Vermont, runs a bed and breakfast." "Do you see her often?" "Not as much as I should," Clara admitted. "She keeps asking me to visit, but work is always so busy and the trip is long. I keep making excuses." "You should go," Vincent said, Family is precious. Believe me, I know what it is like to realize you took time for granted. Clara nodded slowly. Maybe I will. Maybe you could come with me sometime. The offer hung in the air between them, significant in its implications. They had known each other for barely 24 hours, but Vincent found himself wanting to say yes, wanting to meet her mother and see where Clara had grown up. I would like that, he said. They talked late into the night again, and when Vincent finally drove her home, he walked her to her door and kissed her properly this time, soft and sweet and full of promise. She melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt, and when they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "When can I see you again?" Vincent asked, his forehead resting against hers. "Tomorrow," Clara suggested hopefully. "Tomorrow," Vincent agreed. They fell into an easy rhythm over the following weeks. Vincent would pick Clara up after work, and they would explore the city together, finding hidden restaurants and small galleries and parks Clara had never visited despite living in New York for 6 years. She introduced him to her favorite bookstore, a cramped space in the village where the owner knew her by name, and Vincent bought an armful of books based on her recommendations. Clara met Veronica for lunch one afternoon, and Vincent spent the entire meal watching his two favorite women bond over stories of his awkward teenage years. Veronica texted him afterward, a simple message that made his chest tight with happiness. "She is perfect for you. Do not let her go." He had no intention of letting her go. With every day that passed, Vincent found himself more certain that Clara was someone special, someone worth rearranging his life for. He started leaving work earlier, delegating more to his capable team, carving out time for lunches and phone calls and stolen moments. But there was still something between them, an unspoken tension. Clara had not been back to her apartment with him, always stopping at a goodnight kiss at her door. Vincent did not push, content to move at her pace, but he wondered what held her back. The answer came 6 weeks after they met, during a Saturday afternoon they spent in his penthouse. Vincent had invited her over for lunch, planning to cook for her despite his limited skills, and Clara had arrived in jeans and a soft sweater, her hair in a ponytail, looking more beautiful than ever. She walked around his apartment, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, the expensive furniture and original artwork, the space that could have fit her entire building inside it. Her expression grew increasingly closed, and Vincent felt unease prickle down his spine. "Clara, what is wrong?" She turned to face him, wrapping her arms around herself. "This is your life. This penthouse, the expensive art, the cars, the connections. This is who you really are." "I never hid who I am," Vincent said carefully. "You have known from the beginning that I have money." "Knowing it and seeing it are different things," Clara said. "Vincent, I live in a 400-square-foot apartment with a cat and second-hand furniture. I take the subway to work. I budget for groceries. We are from completely different worlds." Vincent crossed to her, taking her shoulders gently. "We are from the same world. We both work hard at jobs we love. We both value honesty and loyalty. We both want to build something meaningful with our lives. Money is just money, Clara. It does not define who I am any more than your apartment defines who you are." "But it does matter," Clara insisted. "People will look at us and think I am with you for your money. They will think I am some gold digger who got lucky." "I do not care what other people think," Vincent said firmly. "The only opinions that matter are yours and mine. Do you have feelings for me?" "Yes," Clara whispered. "God, yes. I am falling in love with you, and it terrifies me." Vincent felt his heart stutter in his chest. "Why does it terrify you?" "Because I could lose you," Clara said, tears gathering in her eyes. "Because this feels too good to be true. Because I am waiting for the other shoe to drop. For you to realize I am not sophisticated enough or successful enough or whatever enough to fit into your life. You are enough exactly as you are, Vincent said intensely. Clara, I am falling in love with you too. Actually, I think I fell in love with you that first night when you were crying on that bench and still managed to laugh at my terrible jokes. You are brilliant and kind and passionate and real, and I have never wanted anyone the way I want you. Vincent, she breathed, and then she was kissing him, deep and desperate and full of all the emotion they had been holding back. He wrapped his arms around her, lifting her against him, and she made a small sound of surprise that turned into a moan. They barely made it to his bedroom, leaving a trail of clothes behind them. Vincent laid her on his bed with reverent care, taking his time learning every curve and hollow of her body. She was beautiful in the afternoon light streaming through the windows, her auburn hair spread across his pillow, her green eyes dark with desire. "Are you sure?" he asked, even though his body was screaming at him to take what she was offering. "I have never been more sure of anything," Clara said, pulling him down to her. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. Vincent had never felt more content, more complete. "Stay with me tonight," he murmured against her hair. "Okay," Clara said, "but I need to feed Monet tomorrow." "Bring him here," Vincent said. "Bring all your things, move in with me." Clara lifted her head, staring at him. "What?" "I know it is fast," Vincent said. "I know we have only been together for 6 weeks, but I love you, Clara. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build a life with you, so move in with me." "That is insane," Clara said, but she was smiling. "Is that a yes?" "Give me 2 weeks to give notice to my landlord and pack my things," Clara said. "And yes, Vincent, yes to all of it." The next few months were a whirlwind of change and adjustment. Clara moved into Vincent's penthouse, bringing her second-hand furniture and her books and her judgmental cat. Monet took over the apartment with typical feline entitlement, claiming the best spots and demanding attention from Vincent every morning. They learned each other's rhythms, negotiating who made coffee and who controlled the thermostat and how to share space when they were both used to living alone. Clara set up a small studio in one of the spare bedrooms, and Vincent would find her there late at night, carefully working on personal restoration projects. He introduced her to his business partners and the important people in his professional life, watching with pride as she charmed them with her intelligence and warmth. She took him to museum events and introduced him to her colleagues, and Vincent discovered he genuinely enjoyed learning about art history and conservation techniques. There were challenges, moments when their different backgrounds created friction. Clara struggled with accepting gifts, insisting on paying for things herself even when it made no financial sense. Vincent sometimes got caught up in work and forgot about plans they had made, earning justified frustration from Clara. But they worked through each issue, talking and compromising and choosing each other again and again. Rebecca reached out to Clara 4 months after the wedding, a long email full of apologies and explanations about stress and cold feet, and not knowing what she was doing. Clara showed it to Vincent, her expression conflicted. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "Part of me wants to forgive her," Clara admitted. "We were friends for over 20 years. That has to count for something." "And the other part?" "The other part remembers how much she hurt me, how she made me feel worthless and small. I do not know if I can trust her again." "You do not have to decide right now," Vincent said. "Take your time, think about it. Whatever you choose, I support you." Clara eventually met Rebecca for coffee, a tentative conversation that did not magically repair their friendship, but opened the possibility for healing. Vincent was proud of her for that, for being willing to try even though she had been hurt. 8 months after they met, Vincent took Clara to Vermont to meet her mother. Clara Hartley was a warm, energetic woman in her 50s who ran her bed and breakfast with cheerful efficiency. She welcomed Vincent with open arms and spent the weekend showing him embarrassing photos of Clara's childhood while Clara protested laughingly. "She makes you happy," Deanne said to Vincent when they had a moment alone on the porch while Clara was inside making hot chocolate. "She makes me happier than I knew was possible," Vincent said honestly. "Then you take care of her," Deanne said seriously. "She has been hurt before by her father leaving, by friends who did not value her. She guards her heart carefully." "I know," Vincent said. "And I promise I will spend every day proving she can trust me with it." Deanne smiled and patted his hand. "Good answer." That night, lying in the guest room of the bed and breakfast with Clara curled against him, Vincent knew it was time. He had been carrying the ring for a month, waiting for the right moment, and this felt perfect. "Clara," he said softly. "Are you awake?" Barely," she murmured. "Why?" "Because I want to ask you something important and I need you conscious for it." That woke her up. She shifted to look at him in the darkness, her eyes adjusting to make out his features. "What is it?" Vincent reached over to the nightstand where he had hidden the small velvet box. He turned on the lamp and opened it, revealing the ring he had spent weeks designing with a jeweler. A simple platinum band with a green emerald that matched Clara's eyes, surrounded by small diamonds. "Clara Hartley," he said, his voice steady despite the nerves jumping in his stomach. "I know we have only been together for 8 months. I know some people will say it is too fast, too soon. But I have never been more certain of anything in my life than I am of this. You are my best friend, my partner, my home. You make me want to be better, to do more, to live fuller. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. Will you marry me?" Clara stared at the ring, tears streaming down her face. "Vincent, you have to actually answer," he said, his heart pounding. "The tears could go either way." She laughed through her tears and threw her arms around his neck. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." Vincent slid the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. They kissed until they were both breathless, and then Clara pulled back to admire the ring. "It is beautiful." "The emerald matches your eyes," Vincent finished. "I wanted you to have something unique, something that was completely you." "I love it," Clara said. "I love you." They told Deanne in the morning over breakfast, and she cried and hugged them both and immediately started planning a wedding. Clara laughed and tried to slow her mother down, but Vincent could see how happy she was, how right this felt. They set a date for the following spring, wanting time to plan but not wanting to wait too long. Veronica took charge of many of the details, working with Clara to create something beautiful but intimate. They decided on a small ceremony in Central Park, followed by a reception at one of Vincent's hotels that he had renovated specifically with events in mind. The months leading up to the wedding flew by in a blur of cake tastings and invitation designs and guest lists. Clara worried about the cost despite Vincent's repeated assurances that money was not an issue, and they compromised by keeping the guest list under 100 people and focusing on meaningful details rather than expensive extravagance. Rebecca did not receive an invitation, a decision Clara made after careful thought. Their coffee meetings had continued sporadically, but the friendship had never recovered its former closeness, and Clara did not want the shadow of that hurt hanging over her wedding day. Vincent's cousin Michael did receive an invitation, though, because ironically, his wedding had been the catalyst for everything. Michael and his wife were among the first to RSVP yes. The night before the wedding, Vincent stayed at a hotel to honor the tradition of not seeing the bride before the ceremony. He barely slept, too excited and nervous and eager for tomorrow. Veronica found him at dawn, pacing his hotel room in his tuxedo pants and undershirt. "You are going to wear a hole in the carpet," she said, handing him a cup of coffee. "What if something goes wrong?" Vincent asked. "What if she changes her mind?" "She is not going to change her mind," Veronica said firmly. "That woman loves you so much it is almost nauseating to watch. Now finish getting dressed before I drag you to the ceremony half naked." The ceremony was held in the Shakespeare Garden in Central Park, a small, secluded area filled with flowers and trees. Chairs had been set up for their guests, and a simple arch decorated with white roses marked where they would exchange vows. Vincent stood under that arch with the officiant, his hands clasped behind his back to hide their shaking, and waited for Clara to appear. When she did, walking down the aisle on her mother's arm because her father was not there to do it, Vincent felt his eyes burn with tears. She wore a simple white dress that flowed around her like water, her auburn hair loose and crowned with a wreath of flowers. She was not wearing much makeup, just enough to enhance her natural beauty, and she was smiling at him with such love that Vincent felt his chest might burst. When she reached him, Diane placed Clara's hand in Vincent's and whispered something to her daughter that made Clara laugh. Then it was just the two of them, facing each other under the spring sky, ready to promise forever. The ceremony was short and sweet, traditional vows that they both meant with every fiber of their being. When the officiant pronounced them married and told Vincent he could kiss his bride, he cupped Clara's face in his hands and kissed her thoroughly, ignoring the cheers and laughter from their guests. "Mrs. Jaeger," he murmured against her lips. "I am keeping Hartley professionally," Clara said. "But I love hearing you say that." The reception was everything they had hoped for, elegant but relaxed, filled with good food and better company. Vincent danced with Clara for their first dance as husband and wife, holding her close as a string quartet played their song. Later, he danced with Diane, thanking her for raising such an incredible daughter, and with Veronica, who cried on his shoulder and told him how proud their parents would have been. Clara danced with Monet's veterinarian, who she had invited because the woman had become a good friend during their frequent visits for Monet's mysterious ailments that usually turned out to be attempts for attention. She danced with Margaret Chen, who had indeed taken Clara on as an informal student and had become a mentor. She danced with Diane, both of them crying and laughing. As the evening wore on and guests began to leave, Vincent found Clara standing by one of the large windows, looking out at the city lights. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. "Happy?" he asked. "Incredibly," Clara said, leaning back against him. "Although I keep waiting to wake up and discover this is all a dream." "It is real," Vincent promised. "This life, this love, us, all real. Do you remember that night at the wedding, when you gave me your handkerchief, of course? How could I forget?" "I was so miserable," Clara said quietly. "I felt like my life was going nowhere, like I would always be on the outside looking in while everyone else found happiness. And then you sat down next to me, and everything changed." Vincent turned her in his arms so he could see her face. "You changed my life too. Before you, I was successful but empty. I had money and power, and none of it meant anything because I had no one to share it with. You gave me purpose, Clara. You gave me a reason to come home at night, a reason to dream about the future." "I love you," Clara said, fresh tears sliding down her cheeks. "I love you too," Vincent said, wiping away her tears with his thumb. "And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that." They honeymooned in Italy. 2 weeks of exploring art museums and eating incredible food and making love in luxurious hotel rooms. Clara dragged Vincent to every church and gallery she could find, explaining techniques and history with infectious enthusiasm. Vincent took her to small villages off the tourist path, places where the food was authentic and the people were welcoming. When they returned to New York, they settled into married life with surprising ease. Clara continued her work at the museum, now also working with Margaret on high-profile restoration projects. Vincent expanded his business into sustainable development, partnering with Veronica to create more affordable housing options. They hosted dinner parties in their penthouse, filling the space with friends and laughter. They adopted a second cat, a tiny black kitten Clara found shivering in the rain, and Monet grudgingly accepted the newcomer. They talked about the future, about children, and where they wanted to be in 5 years and 10 years and 50 years. A year after their wedding, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She told Vincent over breakfast, sliding the positive test across the table to him with shaking hands. He stared at it for a long moment, processing, and then he was around the table and pulling her into his arms, both of them crying and laughing. "We are going to have a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby," Clara confirmed. Pregnancy was not easy for Clara. She had terrible morning sickness that lasted well into her second trimester, and her feet swelled so badly she could only wear slippers. Vincent hovered constantly, driving her crazy with his concern until she finally banished him from the apartment during work hours. But there were beautiful moments too, like feeling the baby kick for the first time and watching Clara's face light up with joy. Like picking out nursery furniture and arguing about names. Like the day they found out they were having a daughter and Vincent cried so hard he had to pull the car over. They named her Victoria Diane Jaeger, after Vincent's father Victor and Clara's mother Diane. She was born on a snowy February morning, tiny and perfect, with her mother's green eyes and her father's dark hair. Vincent held her for the first time and felt his entire world shift, expanding to encompass this new person who depended on them completely. Clara was a natural mother, patient and loving and fiercely protective. Vincent was terrified he would do something wrong, but he learned quickly, adapting to late-night feedings and diaper changes, and the particular cry that meant Victoria needed to be held. Diane moved to New York to be closer to her granddaughter, selling the bed and breakfast and buying a condo in Brooklyn. She helped with childcare when Clara returned to work part-time, and Vincent adjusted his schedule to be home more, determined not to miss important moments. As Victoria grew, she developed a personality that was uniquely her own, stubborn like her father and creative like her mother. She loved art and books and cats, and she wrapped both her parents completely around her tiny finger. When Victoria was 3, Clara surprised Vincent with news of a second pregnancy. This time it was twin boys, and Vincent joked that she was trying to give him a heart attack. The boys were born healthy and loud, identical twins they named Victor and Nathaniel, and suddenly their life was even more chaotic and beautiful. Vincent cut back further on work, promoting trusted employees to leadership positions and focusing his energy on his family. He coached Victoria's soccer team and taught the boys to build with blocks and read bedtime stories every night until his voice was hoarse. Clara continued her restoration work, now teaching occasionally at a university and mentoring young conservators. She found joy in passing on her knowledge, in seeing her students' faces light up when they successfully completed a difficult repair. They moved to a larger apartment when the twins were born, still in Manhattan but with more space for their growing family. They kept the penthouse as an office and retreat, a place to escape when they needed time alone together. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Vincent took Clara back to the diner where they had eaten on their first date. It looked exactly the same, and the same gray-haired waitress even remembered them. "You two are still together," she said, surprised but pleased. "That is wonderful." "We got married," Clara said, showing off her ring. "And we have 3 kids now," Vincent added. The waitress laughed and shook her head. "Good for you. The world needs more love stories like yours." Over burgers and chocolate shakes, Vincent and Clara reminisced about that first night, about how terrified and hurt she had been, about how certain he had been that she was special. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had not walked into that garden?" Clara asked. "Never," Vincent said firmly. "Because it is not a possibility I want to consider. We were meant to find each other, Clara. I believe that." "I believe it too," Clara said. "You offered me your handkerchief that night, but you gave me so much more than that. You gave me love and partnership and a family. You gave me everything." "You gave me everything first," Vincent said, taking her hand across the table. A reason to slow down, to appreciate the small moments, to understand that real wealth has nothing to do with money. "You taught me how to live, Clara, not just exist." They sat in the diner for hours, talking and laughing, and when they finally left, Vincent felt the same flutter in his chest he had experienced that first night. 5 years later, 3 kids later, a whole life built together, and he still felt that flutter every time he looked at his wife. As they drove home through the city, Clara's hand in his, Vincent thought about the handkerchief he had offered a crying woman at a wedding 5 years ago. It had been a simple gesture, the kind of thing his mother had taught him, but it had changed his entire life. He had offered Clara his handkerchief that night at the wedding, a small comfort in her moment of pain. But in accepting it, she had somehow offered him something far greater in return. She had offered him her heart, her trust, her love. And in the years since, they had built something beautiful together, something worth more than all the money in the world. When they got home, Diane was putting the kids to bed. Victoria ran to them, throwing herself into Vincent's arms while the twins toddled behind her, demanding attention. Clara scooped up one twin while Vincent held the other, and they stood together in the entryway of their home, surrounded by the beautiful chaos of their family. "Welcome home," Diane said, smiling at them. "Thank you for watching them," Clara said. After Diane left and the children were finally asleep, Vincent and Clara collapsed on the couch together, exhausted but content. Monet immediately claimed Clara's lap while the younger cat, now named Picasso, draped himself across Vincent's chest. "This is perfect," Clara murmured, her head on Vincent's shoulder. "This is everything," Vincent agreed. He thought back to the man he had been before that wedding, successful but lonely, driven but directionless. He had built an empire but had no one to share it with, no reason to come home at night. And then Clara had stumbled into his life, crying and vulnerable and completely herself, and everything had clicked into place. The handkerchief had been the beginning, a simple offering that had opened the door to everything that followed. But the real gift had been what came after, the choice they both made to take a chance on each other, to trust and love and build a life together. Years passed in a beautiful blur of school plays and birthday parties and family vacations. Victoria grew into a thoughtful teenager with her mother's talent for art, while the twins developed into energetic boys who kept their parents constantly on their toes. Vincent watched his children grow with a mixture of pride and bittersweet nostalgia for their younger years. He and Clara adapted to each stage, learning to parent teenagers and navigate the complicated world of social media and dating and college applications. They presented a united front, supporting their children while maintaining the strong partnership that had always been the foundation of their family. On their 10th anniversary, Vincent surprised Clara with a trip back to Vermont, to the bed and breakfast where he had proposed. They left the kids with Deanne and escaped for a weekend alone, something they had not done in far too long, walking through the grounds of the bed and breakfast. Older and different now, but still beautiful, Vincent felt profound gratitude for the life they had built. "You have any regrets?" he asked Clara as they sat on the same porch where he had talked with Deanne all those years ago. "Not a single one," Clara said without hesitation. "This life, our family, it is everything I never knew I wanted." "Even when the boys flood the bathroom or Victoria slams her door because we will not let her go to some party?" Vincent asked with a smile. "Especially then," Clara said, laughing. "The messy parts are what make it real. Perfect would be boring." That night, in the same guest room where Vincent had proposed, they made love with the slow, familiar passion of people who knew each other completely. Afterward, Clara traced the lines of Vincent's face, memorizing features she had been looking at for a decade. "I love you more now than I did when we got married," she said softly. "That is impossible," Vincent said. "I loved you completely then." "Love grows," Clara said. "It deepens and changes and becomes more complex. I love you as my husband, as the father of my children, as my best friend and partner. That is so much bigger than what we had at the beginning, as wonderful as that was." Vincent pulled her closer, understanding exactly what she meant. Their love had evolved over the years, strengthened by challenges and celebrations, and the everyday moments that made up a life together. As they drifted off to sleep, Vincent thought about the handkerchief again, that small white square of fabric that had started everything. He wondered if Clara still had it, tucked away somewhere as a memento of their beginning. He asked her in the morning over breakfast, and she smiled mysteriously. "Of course I still have it," she said. "It is in my jewelry box, along with other important things. You kept it all these years." "It was the first thing you ever gave me," Clara said simply. "The first gesture of kindness, the first sign that you saw me when I felt invisible. Of course I kept it." Vincent felt his throat tighten with emotion. A decade of marriage, 3 children, a full life together, and she had kept a simple handkerchief because it meant something to her. "I love you," he said, the words inadequate but necessary. "I love you too," Clara said. "Always." They returned home to their children and their life, and Vincent threw himself back into the beautiful chaos with renewed appreciation. He coached the twins' baseball team and helped Victoria prepare for her college applications. He and Clara took dance lessons together, laughing through their mistakes and surprising themselves with how much fun they had. When Victoria was accepted into a prestigious art school in Rhode Island, Clara cried for an hour, proud and heartbroken in equal measure. Vincent held her and let her grieve the end of this chapter while celebrating their daughter's achievement. The day they dropped Victoria off at college, leaving her in a dorm room that already felt like hers, Vincent and Clara drove home in silence, holding hands across the center console. The apartment felt too quiet without her, and the twins, now 13, seemed subdued by their sister's absence. But life adjusted, as it always did. They found a new rhythm, focused more attention on the twins, and appreciated the extra time they had together as a couple. Clara took on more teaching responsibilities, finding fulfillment in mentoring the next generation of conservators. Vincent continued to build his business, now focused on sustainable development and community impact rather than pure profit. On their 15th anniversary, their children surprised them with a party, inviting friends and family to celebrate. Victoria came home from college for the weekend, and the twins had somehow managed to keep the entire thing secret. Vincent and Clara walked into what they thought would be a quiet dinner out, and instead found their home filled with the people they loved most. Diane was there, older but still vibrant, beaming with pride at her grandchildren. Veronica had flown in from California, where she had expanded her nonprofit, bringing her husband and 2 children. Friends from work, neighbors, Margaret Chen and other colleagues all gathered to celebrate 15 years of marriage. Michael, Vincent's cousin whose wedding had started everything, raised a glass for a toast. 15 years ago, I got married in what I thought would be the most important day of my life. Turns out, the most important thing that happened that day was my cousin meeting the woman who would become his wife. Vincent and Clara, you have shown all of us what real love looks like, what real partnership means. Thank you for the example you set, for the way you love each other and your children. Congratulations on 15 years, and here is to 50 more. Everyone cheered and drank, and Vincent pulled Clara close, kissing her in front of everyone. Their children made grossed-out sounds, but they were smiling too, happy to see their parents so in love. Later, when the party had wound down and the guests had gone home, the 5 of them sat together in the living room. Victoria was telling stories about college, the twins were arguing about something inconsequential, and Clara was laughing at all of them. Vincent sat back and watched his family, his heart so full he thought it might burst. This was the life he had built, starting from that moment in a garden when he offered a crying woman his handkerchief. Every choice since then, every decision and compromise and celebration, had led to this moment. His family, his home, his love. Clara caught his eye and smiled, understanding written in her expression. She knew what he was thinking, knew how much this all meant to him. That night, after the kids were in bed, Vincent and Clara stood together on their balcony, looking out at the city lights. 15 years, Clara said softly. It goes so fast. And yet I remember every moment, Vincent said. Every laugh, every argument, every ordinary Tuesday night dinner, all of it matters. All of it brought us here, Clara agreed. She turned to face him, taking both his hands. Thank you for seeing me that night. Thank you for offering me more than just a handkerchief. Thank you for offering me your heart. Thank you for accepting it, Vincent said, for trusting me with yours, for building this life with me. They kissed under the stars, husband and wife, partners and best friends. 2 people who had found each other in the most unexpected way and had chosen each other every day since. The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and new joys. The twins graduated high school and went off to college, leaving Vincent and Clara alone in their apartment for the first time in nearly 2 decades. They adapted again, rediscovering each other as a couple now that active parenting had shifted into a different phase. They traveled together, finally taking trips they had been putting off. They went back to Italy, retracing their honeymoon steps. They visited art museums across Europe, Clara examining restoration work while Vincent simply enjoyed watching her passion. They hiked in national parks and swam in tropical oceans and ate at tiny restaurants in foreign cities. But they always came home to New York, to the life they had built, to the family that continued to grow. Victoria met someone in art school, a kind man named James who loved her creativity and spirit. When they got engaged, Clara cried again, happy tears this time. The wedding was beautiful, held in a botanical garden with flowers everywhere. Vincent walked his daughter down the aisle, his heart breaking and soaring simultaneously. When James promised to love and honor Victoria, Vincent believed him, saw the same devotion in the younger man's eyes that he felt for Clara. At the reception, Vincent danced with Victoria and she whispered, "Thank you for showing me what love should look like. You and Mom set the bar pretty high." "You found someone worthy," Vincent said. "That is all I ever wanted for you." The twins both became successful in their own right, Victor going into architecture and Nathaniel into teaching. They were different but close, supporting each other the way Vincent and Veronica had. Watching them as adults, seeing the men they had become, filled Vincent with immense pride. Grandchildren eventually arrived, Victoria's daughter first, then the twins both having kids within months of each other. Vincent and Clara became the doting grandparents, spoiling their grandchildren and sending them home hyped up on sugar. "We have become our parents," Clara said one day, watching Vincent play with their granddaughter. "Is that such a bad thing?" Vincent asked. "Not at all," Clara said, smiling. "It is perfect." On their 25th anniversary, Vincent planned an elaborate surprise, taking Clara back to the estate in Connecticut where they had met. It had been converted into an event space and hotel, and Vincent had booked it for the weekend. He even found the same garden bench where he had first seen her crying. They sat on that bench together, older but still very much in love, and Vincent pulled out a small box. "What is this?" Clara asked. "Open it." Inside was a handkerchief, white and pristine, embroidered with their initials and their wedding date. "I thought you should have a new one," Vincent said. "One that is not stained with old tears. This one is for happy tears only." Clara laughed and cried at the same time, pressing the handkerchief to her eyes. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Vincent said. 25 years, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, all of it with you. They kissed on that bench in that garden, where everything had started. 25 years ago, Vincent had offered his handkerchief to a crying stranger. Now, he was offering her a lifetime of more handkerchiefs, more tears both sad and happy, more love than either of them had thought possible. Because that was what love was, Vincent had learned. It was not just the grand gestures or the perfect moments. It was showing up every day, offering what you had, being present and honest and true. It was a handkerchief when someone was crying, a hand to hold in the dark, a partner to build a life with. Vincent Jaeger had offered Clara Hartley his handkerchief that night at a wedding, a simple gesture of kindness. But in doing so, he had also offered his heart, his future, his everything. And she had accepted, giving him the same in return. Together, they had built something beautiful, something lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone, living on in their children and grandchildren. As the sun set over the Connecticut estate, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Vincent held his wife close and felt complete. This was his legacy, not the buildings he had constructed or the money he had made, but the love he had shared and the family he had built. And it had all started with a handkerchief and a woman crying at a wedding, two people finding each other exactly when they needed to most.